backup. Is that true?
I'll do my best.
He's going to kick it off, tell a little bit about Canguro, who we are, how we got together. And then we'll spend a few minutes over here, and then let's go spend some time around the race car. That's like the fun stuff. We'll talk about that. So I'll let Dave kick it off.
All right, thanks, Kurt. So, as Kurt says, my name is Dave Connors. I tend to get stuck with the talking portion of whenever we do these things.
A little closer.
So one of the asks was, how did we get together? How did we start racing? And it kind of got started by like-minded people. We'd had conversations about racing probably 15 years ago. And then in 2007, I went to the Baja 1000 for the first time. And I was on my way to South America. And before I went to South America in my Land Cruiser, I thought, I'm either going to race the Baja 1000 or I'm going to drive to Patagonia. Now that I know what it costs to do both, I'm glad I went and did that first, because I never would have been able to do it now, because racing sneaks up on you. So when I got home, Kurt and I sat down with a couple of our other friends and said, hey, let's get into racing. But it was kind of like we were wishy-washy, and I knew once they saw a race and experienced a race, especially in Mexico, that emotional connection would be there. And we went down in 2009, I believe, 2009, and watched the race, supported the race. The precursor of this truck, the guy we bought it from, his truck broke in the Bay of LA, and we happened to be there, and we happened to fix it for him, which kind of opened up some doors for us to be able to get into our 200 series Land Cruiser. And got a couple more people, racing's expensive, so once we got together, we kind of said, hey, are we going to do this? And we committed, and 3 weeks later, we bought a Class 5 Volkswagen in Vegas, and it was 28 degrees that day in Vegas. We went out in the desert, and we rallied, and we were hooked. So none of us can afford to do it individually. We all bring something else to the team, but we have the relationships historically that we know that if I blow the truck up, or if I blow up a $2,000 or $20,000 Porsche motor in a Class 5 Volkswagen, they're not going to blame me. It wasn't my fault. I was just using the throttle. So that's kind of how it allows us to do it. Most people in the racing world are wealthy. They buy it, they go race, and their friends support them. We have 6 people. Over the course of the racing, we've actually had 8 people that have been partial owners of the race team. And that's kind of how we were able to make it work. How we got into Monica, our Land Cruiser, is that we, like I said, we fixed the precursor to it. We got to meet a bunch of those people. And when we raced one Baja 1000, the Mint, Vegas Reno, probably half a dozen races, and that truck came up for sale, and we made an offer, and they accepted, and 3 days later, I'm in Surprise, Arizona? Can't remember where he lived, and it was 117 degrees. So taking the 2 cars, one was 32, the downside is we didn't get to bring it home. It had to stop in Vegas, and we didn't get that same experience of buying the truck when you actually race it until about 2 months later. First time we got in the car, it was Vegas to Reno, and going off the start line, I'd spent a lot of time off-road in 80s and 100s, and that's like the perfect combination of both. It has that plow a little bit of an 80 series, and under series just a hair, but it has the power to actually accelerate out of the corner. And so it probably only took about 20 minutes to get comfortable behind the wheel. It's got a left foot brake set up, so that takes a little bit of getting used to. And then once that was in, game on. And from there on out, it's been a very natural thing for us to be able to race this vehicle. So as we kind of go through, I think we're going to move over to the vehicle because that's really the star over there.
Would you guys rather sit in the shade or go over there? We go over there at the end if you have questions now.
I'm going to let Kurt handle all the mechanical stuff. I was an English major, and I work in an office building. So I can work on cars, I can wrench on cars, I've built trucks, but Kurt's the expert when it comes to the mechanical stuff. So I'm going to let him talk a little bit about our race truck and how we got it to where it is now.
Okay. All right. Any questions? We'll start there. No questions at all. Someone has to have a question.
Who here is just hiding from the sun?
I appreciate your honesty, Randy. That's cool. You're welcome to. Which question?
What's the prep in the days up to the race?
That's a fantastic question. So his question is, what does the race prep look like? And that's what racing is. It's all about race prep. You finish races long before you ever get there. That's how you prep the car. So after a race, we'll do what we call a post-race. We'll get it up on the lift, and we just go through it with a fine-tooth comb, looking for everything that's wrong, that needs to be replaced. And we've got a list of things we know we replace every race. I'll kind of touch on that, but we basically make a giant whiteboard of all the things we have to do, and it's daunting. And mind you, we all have normal jobs. None of us get paid to do this, so it turns into sometimes 2-3 nights a week that we go up there from 7 to midnight, 7 to 1 a.m. and work on the race car. Midnight would be an early night, so it is a lot of time sacrifice. But we make this big list, and then basically to say, hey, it's all got to get done by. We try to be like a couple weeks before the race, and it always turns out to be like, hey, we leave tomorrow, let's go test the car. We'll go out to Knowles and test it. But just kind of front to back, shocks get rebuilt at least once a season, if not every big race. And when I say big race, like a Baja 1000 is a 1,200-mile race. We don't go into a 1,200-mile race without a fresh set of shocks on there. So those all get rebuilt. We used to rebuild our own. Now it actually works out for us, like mentally and time-wise. We put all those on a pallet and send them back to King. Takes them about 8 to 10 weeks to rebuild them. We made some links so that we can like put it back on the ground and roll around in the meantime, but then we can do all the other prep while we're waiting on shocks. So we always know that when the day shocks get back, that's like kind of our final cue. We want to have everything else ready. But it gets pretty much at least once a season. All new suspension members like links, so upper and lower control arms get replaced at least once a season. The steering rack, we go through a steering rack every big race. The rear trailing arms and upper control arms get replaced, and they not because they bend, but usually the bushings will like full on wallow out. Not just the rubber blows out, but the sleeve. So the question often gets asked, why don't you run heavy duty components? Because if you look under there, that is a stock production suspension members, with the exception of the actual shocks themselves. And that's because we run what's called a stock class. So we have to keep stock mounting locations and stock control arms. So uppers, lowers, front and rear have to be stock. The panhard, the axle, the width has to stay stock. So every part that we use has a Toyota part number on it, has a sticker on it, and we buy them right from a dealership. So we're fortunate to work with Toyota Bountiful, and they've been real helpful to us over the years. And we literally get all our prep parts right from a Toyota dealership right over the counter. So all those get replaced. We usually do a leak down test on the motor. So we'll pull all the plugs and test the motor for leak down to see how it's, the condition of the motor. We'll send oil off for a sample and change the fluids. The front diff, we usually pull apart every time because we've blown quite a few front diffs apart. So we'll preventive maintenance, pull that down and inspect the ring and pinion for cracks, look for any problems. We've never touched the tranny or the T-case. I gotta find some wood here, that's not gonna work, but we have never been inside of those. We've done fluid swaps is all. We've never had to touch those, and actually no internal work on the motor. So that vehicle has maybe 25,000 race miles on it now, maybe 20,000 race miles, which is hard life on that motor, and it still is nice and tight. The tranny and T-case are in great shape, but any race could be the last one on that drivetrain. And we do have spares, so it'd be a game ender for that race, but it would be we'd be able to fix it. So great question. Any along those lines? Got others?
So what's been your favorite overland trip in the States? And tell us about it.
Okay. Off Canguro, which is totally fine. Anything's open. We'll talk about anything. Because the question was favorite overlanding trip in the States. That's a perfect one because for those that haven't met Dave or got a chance, in 2007, 6? When did you? 2006, Dave sold his house here in Utah and decided he was going to go live in his 80 series for 9 months and drove his 80 series to the tip of South America. So that just gives you a little background on kind of the wild pair Dave is. He lives in an RV now too because he sold his house again. He likes the vagabond lifestyle. But to answer your question, would be a trip we did with Dave, and it would be, it's called the UCE2, and we did, it was 2, right? UCE2, that stands for Utah Cruiser Expeditions, kind of just a name amongst them, but we went from Four Corners, Utah, to Three Corners, Utah, Idaho, Nevada, so we crisscrossed the entire state of Utah on dirt. We did maybe 10 or 15 miles of pavement. So started at Four Corners. We started right at the Four Corners Monument, got permission from the reservation there to pretty much drive right out of there on dirt, and just crossed highways and little short sections of pavement by Hanksville, Milford, just a few little sections, and made our way to about within maybe 5 miles of the monument on the Three Corners, so all off-road. Probably my favorite. That's one I want to do again.
About 950 miles.
Yeah, 950 miles of dirt crisscrossing the state.
What mods have you done to the engine?
Okay, mods on the engine of the race car again. Stock class, we can't do anything.
The intake's been modified from that.
So the intake's been, air filter has been modified to run a big aftermarket air filter, a big high filtration one. A stock filter would last for about 1 hour in a race. Even our big one, we change out at fuel stops. We've dealt with that thing filling full of silt so much that it starves for air. And I mean, like, brings the car to its knees. So it does run a real big filter. If you poke underneath the passenger footwell, there's a big filter mounted in there, so the intake runs inside the cab. But as far as the motor itself, is a completely sealed Toyota unit, stock Toyota unit, 0 mods.
We've pulled the AC compressor off, so we have to run different valves.
No something. No AC. Dave's right. No AC. It has been desmogged a little bit, just stuff that wouldn't survive a race or just wouldn't be appropriate in a race environment. But other than that, that is just a turnkey 3UR57.
You run a special oil.
What's that?
You run a special oil.
Yeah, Mobile One. Just we buy it at the parts store. Yeah, just nothing too special. That it lasts really well. And our oil, we get a lot of silica in all our oil results, just from all the silt. That's been our one failure mode that we've dealt with on that motor. Is 2 times now we've had the throttle body on the front of the motor actually stop working because it gets so full of silt. Even with that filter, and some of it's coming in externally through the motor, but that's been the one failure that we've dealt with on a regular basis.
We do run different weights in our TKC transmission, and it kind of depends on where the race is. Baja shockingly is cold. We'll race for 40 degrees all night long, so we run a little bit thinner oil down there versus when we run stateside races.
What got you into the Toyota brand for the vehicle?
How about we each answer? I'll let Dave go first. What got you into the Toyota brand?
So for racing specifically?
Either or, I guess. Yeah.
Well, we all met through Land Cruisers, and that's why when we had a chance, we actually went from a slower class, or from a faster class to a slower class, because we wanted to race a Land Cruiser. I mean, that's kind of where it is. I bought my first Land Cruiser in 1997, and I drove it to Alaska. And I put 100,000 miles on that thing in 2 years. A couple Alaska trips, went to Mexico, and no 0 issues. I replaced starter contacts, and that was it. 220,000 miles, I sold it regrettably. FJ60 is worth a lot of money now. And just that reliability has paid off for me. I've had other manufacturer, primarily BMWs, because I love straight 6s. But the reliability, and then, Toyota people back pre-internet, it was hard for us to find parts. We had to find other people who knew stuff, and that's where those relationships formed, and that's kind of what made me stay into that world.
Mine would be similar. I mean, obviously met these guys through Land Cruisers, so that's how we got into the Toyota to race. We started with that Volkswagen, but none of us loved it. In fact, we hated that car. We loved to hate it. We had to take the motor apart every race. So like every single race, the motor had to come out of that race car. We'd send it to, we started rebuilding it locally, and that they didn't last, so we would send it to California and have that motor torn apart by a Volkswagen specialist. So to go from that to this racing this Land Cruiser where we have to throw some suspension parts on it, and don't get me wrong, we spent a lot of time prepping it, but it wasn't nearly the level that Volkswagen took. So the Toyota just made sense to all of us because we're all kind of Toyota diehards. Personally, I got into Toyotas as a 15-year-old. I bought a 1968 FJ40 that had been stored around, and I fell in love and wanted a 40 because I was on a Boy Scout mountain bike trip in Moab, and we were on the Poison Spider Trail, and a group of Land Cruisers came rolling by, and I was like 14 or 15 at that time, and I said, I'm gonna get me one of those, I'm gonna find one. And I started just mentioning it and looking. This is back in the day of, looking at the newspaper classifieds and calling on them. And I remember calling, and the one had lockers, and I thought those were the locking hubs on the front. I had this guy on the phone explaining this to me, and I was a total rookie about it. But ended up an aunt of mine, her brother had one parked behind their dad's house, and he had just decided to go full time in the Navy. So she said, "Well, go look at it. And I bet he'd take a good deal on it." So I bought my first FJ40 in it. I was 15, and I've had one since. That's my Toyota story.
You mentioned like the 60 that you sold regrettably. Is that the one that got away? And the same question for you. If there was one that got away, which one was it?
I had a chance to buy it like 4 years later, and the people who were selling it had not maintained it. So at that point, it hadn't got away. The one that actually got away, oddly enough, was a tan FJ60, which is my dream color, that a friend had in a field. 4 years ago, I could have got for $900. But a different friend bought it because he had first dibs on it. And he only kept it for about 6 months, did some work on it, and now that truck was on KSL 2 months ago for 10 grand. So that's the one that got away.
Are you talking about the friend that got away or the truck?
No, we're still friends. As a matter of fact, he's part of the race team. I picked up the truck from his house last night. But I love my vehicles. I mean, people ask me the one I drove South America, I lived on for 9 months. Put 268,000 miles on it. When I sold it, I haven't had a second thought about it since. I use my trucks, I abuse them, that's the memories they create. I want the next thing to build into. I like building the trucks and using them. I don't have that sort of regret or anything like that. But the tan 60 is one that's kind of, you know, I wish I would have had it, but it doesn't bother me that I, that I missed out on it.
I'd have to think. I'm not really good at selling any of the ones I have. I'm kind of not hoarder is probably appropriate, but I don't really have any that I miss. I mean, my first FJ40, I do miss it, but it's come up for sale a few times, and I guess I haven't missed it enough to buy it again. So.
Yeah, my 40 is on KSL right now too.
Okay, so yeah, Dave had that's right. The Seafoam one. It's been back on KSL. I don't know. I keep it for a long time. The blue FJ40 that I have now, and I didn't bring it today. It's in a state of somewhat disrepair. Needs a set of tires and some love, but I've had that for 17 years now. So I guess I like. That's one I'd have a hard time selling. Any other questions?
I got another one. When you're either racing or doing overland trips, do you have a preferred system for navigation? Do you prefer using electronic devices or old-fashioned maps, or what's your go-to for that type of stuff?
So for those who couldn't hear his questions, preferred mapping for trips. And it's a fantastic, and I'd say the answer changes based on trips. Dave and I are both like paper map aficionados, and I think, I know a lot of you in the group here are paper map lovers too, but it's hard to say that you can't get by with, the apps these days and some of the softwares. So for like desert racing, I'll use that one. We run like a Lawrence GPS in there, and before you start the race, they load a GPS file into your computer. Some teams go out and pre-run the race course themselves for the weeks leading up, so they make hundreds of marks on that GPS file. They know where every turn is, they know where passing spots are. We rely on BF Goodrich as a sponsor to give us that file. But to go into that without a map and to try and rely on a paper map, insane. I mean, it'd be a death mark to try and have a paper map. We have course notes that Dave gets laminated and tell you all the dangers at different miles. I mean, these are like legit gnarly dangers that you may be coming into really fast. And even reading those in the race car is hard.
About 3 miles.
Yeah, you just start saying we're gonna just keep our eyes peeled because they fly out the window or you're covered in silt, so it doesn't work. So we use that system. On the trips that I do personally or with the groups that we do, I use the HEMA Navigator app. I'm a big fan of that. It just worked out really well. And part of that is we've had really good support from them on getting maps for some of the countries we've been in and the places we're going. And they work really well in Utah too. Gaia is an awesome one. Avenza, Backcountry Navigator. I think all of them are cool in their own way. You just have to learn which one works best for you on your app, your device. Some work better on others, and get to know it. But don't lose the skill of how to read a paper map. Because if you can't read a paper map, you're not going to read a map on an app or on a device that well either. It's going to be daunting. So learn how to, read a paper map. Do you have anything on that one, Dave?
I agree.
Dave agrees. Yeah, it's easy. Yeah.
How many stock class rigs are there?
How many stock class rigs? Not enough.
Depends on the race.
Yeah, what you covered, Dave.
It kind of depends on the race. The smaller races, sometimes it's just us. We've actually raced with the 8 Unlimiteds before. We raced Vegas to Reno because they kind of did away with our class because they created a separate class for the V6 Raptor. So all those guys got their own class and came out of ours, which we're kind of bitter about. So we raced with the Class 8s, which is the Unlimited. We actually won that race, which we're pretty stoked about. But that's the type of course where we can keep up because it's flat, it's farm roads, it's fast. You get us in a suspension race like in the 1000, the Mid 400, we'd lose by 17 hours to a good Class 8 truck. So it kind of varies. The most we've raced against in that truck is 7 in the Baja 1000 in 14. And we've raced where we just race ourselves. But those races are more the ones where we go and have fun. Like we just raced in Jackpot 2 weeks ago, that's why the truck's so dirty, and there's 5 laps. So all 5 guys took a lap. The guys we were racing against didn't stop and pit. We pitted 4 times. So that was a race for us just to go have fun in the racetrack because we weren't going to compete with a 6100 or a trophy truck or anything like that who we were racing against. So kind of varies from race to race. But not enough. The V6 Raptor rules changes kind of kill our class a lot.
I'd add that while you're racing against people in class for points or for the trophy or to get on the podium, really you're racing everybody on the race course, especially in lap races. And even in the peninsula race or point-to-point race like the Baja 1000, there's still trophy trucks that break down and they're behind you. So I mean, you're still in the race the whole time. And we're not the last car to start the race, so there's traffic behind you trying to pass the whole time too. So even though you're not always racing people in your class, you're racing everybody. But it's still a lot of fun to be out there.
Well, yeah, and along those lines, some of the things that keep you motivated. If you're 30 hours in a race, you've been in the truck for 14 hours, that dust on the horizon, you don't care if it's a Class 11 bug or a trophy truck, that's your goal. That keeps you mentally, like, I'm going to get that guy before I get out of the racetrack, and that keeps you focused and going. Of course, when the trophy truck comes up behind you with that same mentality, it's frightening.
Get out the way.
Because they don't stop, they don't worry. We got nerfed by a Class 1. If you look in the back of the truck, we were 12 hours, me and my co-driver, 12 hours into our leg, and we're going through this river, and there's Mexicans everywhere cheering us on, and we think we're rock stars. Like, this is the greatest thing ever. We've been in the car for the race for 30 hours at this point. There's a Class 1 behind us, and it hit us and lifted us off the ground. We're like, you guys are 20 hours behind the finishers. What are you doing? They want to go fast, and they were sick of our dust, so it happens.
Maybe some memorable moments that you have from the racing experiences, maybe highlights from recent races.
So, I'm going to take one of each, and I'm going to let Kurt do the same.
Okay.
So this year in Baja, we had our front spindle come off, and it took us about 4 hours to get it fixed. And I do all the race logistics for the team, so I kind of know where everyone is and what's going on. So we had to make like a mid-race plan to move, and when the truck finally got to me, it was 100%, and the people we were racing against had made it through a fast section in the dark. So I got permission from the team, like, we're going to win the race. Don't drive 90%, don't drive 85%, go catch him. So the sun came up as I come to Bay of LA. It was the best sunrise I've ever seen. Crescent moon, stars glowing, pink everywhere, the ocean's glowing, and I've been given permission to drive 100%. And it was pure bliss. It was amazing. Now, that came to a screeching halt about 6 hours later where we were going 7 miles an hour for 3 hours, but that's a different part of that story. That's one of my favorite moments for sure. My least favorite moment, I'm a big believer you should always race the same co-drivers because of communication and experience, and it's less stress if you know how someone's going to handle a corner, you're not tensing up as a co-driver. So we're at the mid-400, which we've raced twice and failed miserably both times, and I started the race in the passenger seat, and we swapped drivers, and I assumed he'd watched the trucks go off the big jump. He assumed I'd been off the big jump, but we actually started after it. So we come around the corner, and he's panned at the Red Bull jump, and my instinct's like, we're going way too fast. His instinct is, well, we're going the right speed because Dave would have warned me, and we hucked that thing about 150 feet, 20 feet in the air. And the second we landed, my back seized up. So I'm screaming, I'm on belt, and like, Will, stop, get out of the, I have to get out of the car. I cannot move. I'm in immense pain, thinking that she's indestructible. Well, I get out, I fall on the ground, still all geared up, and I smell oil, and I look over, and we have oil just hemorrhaging out of our oil pan. So I'm laying on the ground, I can't move, I'm in so much pain, and so I'm screaming at Will, he can't hear me, he's on the radio trying to get someone to take my place. We compressed our motor mounts enough that the oil pan actually hit the top of the diff and cracked it. So that's my least favorite moment because it hurt. We were close to the start of the Unlimited race, so there's probably 2,000 people watched this happen. And how does it, the net result is me laying on the ground, screaming in pain, while oil's pouring out around me. And they had to come out and like drag us off and dump the soaked up oil. Yes, thank you. Yeah. Kitty litter. Like literally, and there's 2,000 people watching me with my back problems. So those are two of my memories. That was a bad day.
Okay, mine's maybe a most memorable, funny, and horrible at the same time. It was in the old race car, and I think our very first Baja, and Mark, I was co-driving. Mark actually started off the finish line, and I was in the passenger seat. We had been in the car for maybe 6-7 hours, and then we flipped seats. And was it our first race or second race? First race, and then flipped seats, and then I'm driving, and Mark was in the passenger seat. And Mark, we found, is like the world's worst navigator, and he'll own up to that. Like, he can't read this. He's like, hey, what does this mean? Like, I can't see the screen. It's fuzzy. We need a bigger one. And he just has a rough time co-driving. And it's really important as a driver to be hearing from this guy, like, hey, where do we turn? Where do we go? What's coming up? Is there any bad stuff? And he was just having a hard time, and I could start hearing his breathing changing. And we have a pumper system in a full face helmet with a neck skirt, so you're just calm the whole time talking to each other. And there's a little pumper, and you guys would be happy to show you on the car, that basically a vacuum tube into your helmet so it pumps fresh air. That's how you stay alive in all that dust. And I could hear Mark flipping his visor up every once in a while, getting a little bit of fresh air. That's usually a sign, if you start hearing that, you ask, hey, are you okay over there? And sometimes they just need a little fresh air, they need to clear the visor, but I could kind of hear Mark like making some little like burp, the noises over there. And finally he said, hey man, we got to pull over, like pull over. There was lights behind us, we're on a super narrow section of racetrack, there was nowhere to pull over, giant saguaro cactuses everywhere. I'm like, I'll pull over as soon as I can, Mark. And I could hear him at this point just like going to town in his helmet. By the time I pulled over, I looked over and it had been like full on explosion inside his helmet. He'd vomited inside the helmet, he's locked in the helmet. So I was just like, sorry Mark, I had to flip my helmet back down and just turn my breather back on. I'm like, you deal with that over there, you get that little situation taken care of. We're in the middle of nowhere, our chase crew's probably 4 hours away before we're gonna get out of that, and he's now got a helmet full of vomit. They just gotta like take off, like used his neck skirt, his couple $100 fire neck skirt, to wipe out the helmet, get the best he could, and then had to put it back on for 4 more hours on a dusty, dirty road, and bear with that. And he already had a gut ache. And the moral of the story, I'll wrap it all together, is don't drink chocolate milk before you get in a race car.
So he got
Cajun.
He got sick a second.
That's right, he did.
Because he drank chocolate milk.
That's
I
right.
see him at the starting line. Like,
First-
why are you drinking milk? It's chocolate. And I looked at him, and I just walked away.
So
I don't want to do
we
it.
now have to police what Mark eats before the race. This time was Cajun trail mix. That's what it was. It was Cajun trail mix that he thought would be a great idea before getting the race car. And it does jostle your guts. We have a few guys on our team that you get a little queasy in the passenger seat. You're staring at that GPS and it does get you a little woozy. But that's probably my most memorable moment to date of all the things we've done.
I got in Mark's seat after that happened.
Yeah, Dave had to climb in that car afterwards. There have been, we get the nitty gritties of, the question comes up, so I'll just approach it. Restroom breaks. You're in the car for sometimes 8-10 hours in one seat and never get out. So we wear an external catheter. Won't go into too many graphic details, but they don't always work. So a few guys have had to get into some soiled seats too. I know Dave's had to climb into a seat that your best buddy's been in for 8 hours. And it's not always like a glamorous thing to do, but you got to get in the car, so it's got to happen.
They're hard shell seats with no holes in the bottom.
Yeah,
You
they're-
do the math.
Yeah, it's bad.
What's a bucket list location you guys want to overlap?
Oh, that's a great question. It's a bucket list overlap. I'll let Dave do that one.
So I really want to go do the stands. That's where I want to go next, the stands in Mongolia. I have a route planned, I just need the money. As Kurt mentioned, I have no problems walking away from my life and going and doing it. So this will sound weird. I started following a bunch of Land Cruiser guys from Iran on Instagram, and I'm pretty sure I've been reported to Homeland Security because they now all follow me. And by the way, the Middle Easterns love Monica. If you go look at our followers on social media, probably a third of them are from Dubai or Qatar, where they go rally in the dunes. But I've spent probably 30 hours in Iraq and Iran exploring the desert on Google Earth. And there are places that I was in Jordan last year, got to drive around the Wadi Rum for 20 hours in my own car, which was amazing. But I drove to the Iraq border and just kind of looked. Hopefully sometime in my life, who's read Who Needs a Road? Who Needs a Road? They talk about Iraq. They drive through Libya and say we're the last Westerners who will ever drive through Libya when they're out in the dunes. And I've had that in my head for 17, 18 years since I first read that book. I'm a desert guy through and through. I don't care about mountains. I lived in Alaska for 6 years. I lived half a mile from a glacier. I've climbed underneath them on top of it, but I'm a desert guy. For me, it's the Middle East. But the stands are doable.
That's a great one. There's a lot of places. I think it changes all the time, but I'd love to get to Antarctica. And then I'd also like to do, same with Dave, North Africa, Middle East. It's not always the most hospitable place right now, but people are doing trips there, and there's ways you can do it safely. So I think that would be my bucket list.
What would you consider maybe the most exotic place that you've already done?
Most exotic place I've already done, probably the most recent one I've done, which is Greenland. We were the first team that drove south to north across Greenland. We did that in March and April of this year. Dave?
I can't really answer after that answer, can I? I've been in 19 countries off-road. I just got back from Japan and went to drove a 200 on an off-road park. You have to pay because it's Japan, right? Jordan was an amazing experience for me. I did a lot of off-roading. I got a local veteran guide who gave me access to places I couldn't go, and it was a friend of a friend of a friend. I mean, literally, that's how it happened, and that was pretty cool. I still go back to when I hopped on a plane to Colombia back in 2007, having grown up in the 80s. But the Colombian people were amazing, and I did some four-wheel with some clubs down there. I had done 4x4 fun races, so I got in the way deep backcountry with them, which was pretty awesome.
We'll do a couple more here, and then let's go do a walk around to the race car and kind of chat about the race car.
I was going to ask, in all your travels, where's your favorite place to go and the most hospitable, friendliest people, greatest adventure? And then where's been the most danger? Maybe not apparent, but maybe imminent, where you felt it.
My favorite place is Bolivia. I could spend the rest of my life in Bolivia. It has the desert, it has the jungles, it has the Andes, it has everything, except for ocean, but I don't care about the ocean. I've never felt unsafe. I almost rolled down a volcano in Panama, but that was my own doing. I felt unsafe walking the jungle with winch cables and stuff like that, but I've never felt unsafe with people. I think the Jordanian people are the nicest people I've ever met. They're the most welcoming. Kurt says I don't use GPS. I landed in Amman, Jordan at 1 o'clock in the morning and my phone navigation didn't work. I drove into the city figuring I'd find the Marriott Hotel. So I used points. 2 hours later, I'm at some roadside stand eating shawarma at 4 o'clock in the morning, haven't found my hotel, with a bunch of people that don't speak English. And they all came up, shook my hand, said, "Welcome to Jordan," that's all they could say. And I said, "Marriott," and they just look at me. The Jordanian people are the nicest people I've met in the country I've been to, without question.
So I'd say friendliest. Generally, everywhere you go, I've experienced there's friendly people, and they're very hospitable. I mean, there's regions that are less safe than others, but usually that's involved in their own geopolitical problems. If you're involved in the drug trade in Central America, you're going to find trouble, and that would go for South America too. Friendliest, Australia is kind of it's super friendly. Everyone there is really friendly, but just amazing terrain, and they really support the lifestyle of off-roading and backcountry travel there. So that'd be a hard one to beat. And out with Dave, Colombia, some of the friendliest people. On our recent trip last year to Colombia with the Expedition Overland group, we met up with a lot of locals that took us on some fantastic 4x4 routes, and they love 4x4 down there. I mean, it's that's what they live their weekends for, is to go do 3-day trips, and they do it hard, and they love it. It's it's a religion for them. It's almost on that level how much they get into their 4-wheel drive trips down there.
Colombian people are different. I've met friendly people everywhere. I have friends from Colombia that I still keep in touch with. That's kind of the differences. They welcome me in their homes, right? Colombian people are fantastic. But not
Any others? Should we go walk around the car? Okay, we'll leave the bike behind. 2 things I want to touch on before we get away from the bike. August 17th, we're having our Cruiser Outfitters Customer Appreciation Barbecue. It's in Sandy at Flatiron Mesa Park. I would love to see all of you there. Bring your Toyota, it doesn't matter if it's a Land Cruiser or not, we'd love to have you. And then September 8th is the Cruiser Fest event at the Land Cruiser Heritage Museum. There's flyers for both at the Wasatch Cruisers booth and the Cruiser Outfitters one. Make sure you get one, because I'd love to see you guys at all of them. And the Cruiser Fest one does have trail rides leading to the event. So there's groups starting in Denver, I believe an Idaho group, and a Green River group will be coming up through the swell. So if you want to do a 3-day trip to hang out with a bunch of Toyota guys on the way to the museum, sign up. It'd be fun to have you. That's it. Let's go talk about the car.